Good morning from Washington. My name is Andrew Tabler. I'm the Martin J. Gross Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to this momentous and historic, I dare say, virtual policy forum entitled Building the Post-Assad Syria: How to Ensure the Process Reflects the Will of the Syrian People. In a country long divided, Syrians, and after the fall of Assad, now face the daunting task of rebuilding their state after the fall of that brutal Assad regime. As various domestic and foreign actors vie for control, the list of potential dangers will grow, from power vacuums to minority rights violations and terrorist violence. In a nation full of diverse voices, it is vital to ensure that both of these processes meet national security challenges while ushering in a viable political transition that reflects the will of the Syrian people. So to have that forward-looking discussion at this momentous time, the Washington Institute is pleased to host this virtual policy forum with a number of prominent Syrian analysts and activists who I've had the pleasure to know personally and professionally over the course of the Syrian revolution. First, Ibrahim Al-Assil is an adjunct professor at George Washington University and a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. He's also a founding member of the Syrian nonviolence movement, and he joins us today from Damascus. Farouq Habib is the general manager of the White Helmets humanitarian organization and has been instrumental in the formation and support of many Syrian grassroots initiatives. He's also joining us today from Damascus. Rafif Jouejati is a board member of the Nonviolence International, co-founder and director of the Foundation to Restore Equality in Education in Syria, and principal architect of the Syrian Freedom Charter Project. She is joining us today from Spain. And last but not least, Mahmoud Meslat is co-chair of the Syrian Democratic Council and a lecturer on Middle Eastern Studies at Oberlin College. He's joining us today from Hasakeh in Northeast Syria. So without further ado, I'm going to let the panelists today speak. We're going to go right down the line in terms of the introductions I just made. And then after that, we will be followed by some questions and answers. For those of you that have questions, please type them into the Zoom bar at the bottom of the screen. We'll do our best during the Q&A session to answer as many as possible. Okay, Ibrahim, please take it away. I think you're still muted.
Okay. Hi, Andrew. Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. Good evening from Damascus, a city you are familiar with. And hope to see you here again someday soon. It's really smart and well-respected people. I'm gonna share some thoughts with you for the next 4 to 5 minutes, and then see what we can cover during the Q&A. And I'll start with this: the fall of the because no one was ready. I mean, no one is ever ready for a fall of a regime, but specifically for this situation, governed Idlib for a few years before. Idlib is a small province inside Syria. It has now much more population, but it's not as complicated as Aleppo and Damascus when we talk about the social fabric and the diversity of communities in these large cities, let alone the rest of Syria. When I talk to people, I see many people are focusing on security and economy. Many people are still cautious and still worried about the security situation inside Syria, and if there will be some collapse in the security, if there will be some violence here and there. Most people feel a little bit some sort of a relief for the way things went, and that there were no real bloodshed across Syria. There were limited clashes in the battles, and that I think that really helped because people didn't feel the urgent need for revenge, especially when we talk about the rebels. That might change in the future, but it's how I see the situation now. But when we move to economy, the situation is really, really bad. And of course, it's also, I think, one of the reasons why the Assad regime fell inside Syria. The economy is in a very bad situation. Most people spend their day concerned about food and fuel and electricity. And I'm talking about the probably 0.1 or even 0.01 of the population. The rest of the population is even in a very bad situation. Most people are concerned about their daily food, about healthcare. There is no healthcare. Education is also in a very bad situation. So all these issues are concerns in the cities, and we're not even talking about the areas that were totally destroyed and that were attacked and were targeted by airstrikes inside Syria. I'm still only talking about areas, Damascus and Aleppo and the big cities that were not technically targeted by airstrikes over the last decades. Finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the political process itself. It is a concern. It's not a concern of the average people, the majority of people, because they don't have time to even think about that. When I ask them, they don't usually know what happened during that day on the political level. But those who are involved in politics, the political activists, the remnants of the opposition inside Syria, of course, they are also very concerned about if there will be any sort of inclusion or not. There are no talks about elections, and I think elections at this point cannot happen inside Syria. There is no infrastructure. It monitors. We need people to be back home also from the camps, but inclusivity and the transition that they are interested or willing to share power. I just came back from a protest in Umayyad Square in Damascus, where a few thousand people, it's different groups of civil society. They were demanding secularism and inclusivity in government. So clearly, Syrian civil society is regrouping, and that's going to be a very serious voice. I don't know how HTS is going to deal with that, but also that's probably the silver lining and what brings me hope. Those are my initial remarks, and looking forward to going more into details in the Q&A session.
Great. Ibrahim, just as a matter of fact, I don't know what others were feeling, but your transmission was broken up a number of times. So it might be better when we get to the question and answer period if you shut your camera off. I'll give you a heads up about that.
Will do.
It'll reduce the bandwidth, but we know it's you, so we're not going to doubt that. We don't think you're Zoom bombing.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Okay, Farouq, please take it away.
Hi, Andrew, and everyone. Well, for us, it's a moment of hope. We believe all people feel relieved, including those who were loyalists and supported one for whatever reasons. But they also suffered a lot as communities, and they were under big pressure for the past at least couple of years. So all people feel hopeful. Some are worried indeed, which is justified. There are legitimate concerns in absence of a political vision. There is no clear roadmap. We hear the new authorities sending many messages of assurances, mostly addressing concerns of international community rather than the local population, and especially the population of the revolution itself. However, people feel united, and we need to maintain this moment of unity by ensuring stability, resuming services, and giving hope to the people. What's happened is an earthquake in a positive sense. Nobody imagined this regime will collapse in 10 days. And of course, the collapse was not as a result of military operations of the past 10 days. It was a result of the uh, struggle and big sacrifices of all the Syrian people for the past 14 years and the support from our partners. And all Syrian people should play a role in building the new regime, the new government, which should be inclusive, representative, and democratically elected. So we're looking forward with a lot of hope, and we believe we still have a lot to achieve full victory of the Syrian revolution, because it's not only about toppling the regime, it's about building a new, free, prosperous, and democratic Syria.
Great. Thank you very much. Rafif, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. And I'm very honored to be with my esteemed fellow panelists. I want to start by giving a huge mabruk to all the Syrian people around the world who can finally feel free to express themselves, use their real names, continue in their work in an open and transparent manner. I do want to piggyback a little bit on one of Farouq's points, which is that victory of this Syrian revolution did not just happen in an 11-day takeover by HTS. And while we are grateful to them for finally bringing an end to the Assad regime, I want to think back on the past 13 plus years and all the activists who gave their lives in many cases, and those who sacrificed so much from nonviolent protests and demonstrations to active civil society on the ground at a time when delivering food baskets was illegal and could get you killed. In these 13 years, civil society has expanded and matured so much in Syria that while I, like my fellow panelists, might be cautiously optimistic, I'm a little bit more optimistic maybe simply because I believe that Syrians on the ground have the capacity to start rebuilding their nation. They definitely need support from the international community, but I believe people are poised and ready. Groups that seem to disappear over the years, like the local coordination committees in Syria, which I used to represent, these groups are coming back. Political parties are emerging right and left. For example, I'm the vice president of the Syrian Liberal Party, and we are happy today to say we're no longer in exile, and we'll be opening an office in Damascus soon. So all of this is to say that while we have optimism and we finally feel free, we do need to pay careful attention to the statements and the actions of HTS. In particular, I'd like to call out the recent statements by their spokesperson on his position on women in government. We need to be careful of these kinds of statements. We need to be able to shape our future, and we need to work with HTS to make sure that successive governments respond to the call of the revolution, which is freedom, dignity, democracy, equality for all Syrians. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Mahmoud, please. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and it's an honor to be with you and your panels this evening. I am speaking to you from Northeast Syria, free Northeast Syria. We are very optimistic. We are very hopeful. We look at the future with pride, because for decades, not just Bashar al-Assad, but his father too, they done unbelievable things in our region with our people, and we've seen it. We are very hopeful. We are celebrating every day, to be honest. And in Northeast Syria, we have some issue. I want to address it to your panel and to yourself, sir. Turkey have the national army, and it tried to get involved in some peaceful villages and cities in Northeast Syria. And this is very serious, because we try to bring peace and stability to our region, and we maintain peace and stability. We still have a lot of issues and challenges facing us in this region, especially with ISIS. We defeat ISIS in the previous years. We like to celebrate this event. We like to celebrate this big victory. The brutal regime gone, but unfortunately, we still facing consequences from Turkey and from some of the rebels coming from different direction in Deir ez-Zor and in Ain al-Arab Kobani and in Manbij. And hopefully we can put an end to these crises. Again, the future of Syria after decade, as I mentioned, of a brutal civil war and hinges on transition. The Syrian has to come together. It's a time for unity. It's a time for celebration. All Syrians. The Syrian fabric is very rich, and we are the land of civilization, and everybody knows. And we deserve to celebrate together as Arab and Kurd, as a Christian, as Yazidis, as Druze, all of us in this victory. We look with positive toward Damascus. Even we know the roots of the transitional government, but we are optimistic, and we will work with them. And we will reach out to them soon to make sure that we all together in this, and we are unified in this victory. Thank you.
Great. Got everything out of the way there. So, I think there's a couple of different ways to address the issue in front of us. And I think it's, I think the real question on everyone's mind now is what comes next in Damascus in terms of governance, right? In terms of what is going to be the basis, what is going to constitute the current government. And that the reason why I use that term is that the only internationally agreed upon mechanism for bringing about a new Syria is United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254, which I know many of you know. It's probably like it is mine, sort of tattooed to the inside of my brain in dealing with it for so many years. That mechanism, roughly in line with the Geneva Communique of 2012, outlines the current government, the opposition, and other groups coming together to form this new transitional government that moves us forward towards, the elections that Ibrahim was referring to, and then a new form of government in Damascus. We've seen from HTS the announcement of an interim government that would supposedly, I believe, expire in terms of the 1st of March. So I think the reason why this policy forum is important, or at least your ideas coming out of it, is to understand what are the bottom lines. And I'd like to hear this from all of you. If you had minimum three things, bottom lines that you think are important, that should be included in this new Syria, either the process of getting to the new Syria or actually achieving a new Syrian form of government. If I could just ask each of you to go right down the line, and what would be your three top recommendations? What are the things that you believe you must see as Syrians in order to bring about stability, peace, and prosperity in your country. So, Ibrahim, if we could start out with you again, and maybe turn off your camera in case the bandwidth issues are again a problem.
I hope it's going to be better now that you can hear me.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so the three things, Andrew, I could think of now. Yes, first thing is certainly inclusivity. And you know that also a fluid word, because what do we need? What do we mean by inclusivity? But at least what I want to see is that those who are in power, that they are actually of a national dialogue in Damascus, with different groups being represented in those in that number two, certainly the issue of freedom of expression.
Ibrahim, we're not getting a lot of what you're saying, unfortunately, even with the camera off. I don't know if there's a possibility, given the camera is off, to maybe move the phone towards the window. I realize these are low-tech solutions for difficult but simple problems. If you can hear me, please give that a try, because I liked what I heard from your initial comments. We just didn't get all of them.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think so. Are you hanging out the window right now, or just in a different place?
No.
Yeah, it's still breaking up, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you want to move someone, I don't know if you heard my second point. So it was inclusivity, freedom of speech, and the third one, that's that the public space should be actually offered to everyone, especially when we talk about things like the Syrian TV, the Syrian national TV,
Right.
that different actors and different communities and different voices should be allowed to express themselves there, and the HTS should not be or should not just try to monopolize and dominate the public space.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for bearing with us. We realize there are bandwidth issues coming from Damascus. We have them here in the United States too on occasion. So, Farouq, please give us your wisdom.
Well, we believe working on transitional justice and peace building is very important to prevent individual attempts to revenge. We need to see an independent commission for truth and justice, and to work on the part of the missing persons. We believe it's also very important to continue. We believe also it's very important to empower the civil society, continue and scale up international support to the independent civil society in Syria to ensure diversity and proper participation from all Syrian communities in the new post. Also need to see freedom of expression, as Ibrahim said, which is very important and lacked in Syria a long time ago.
Great. Thank you. Rafif.
I'm glad my colleagues made all those points, because I have a laundry list and you said 3.
Well, you can go over 3, Rafif. We're old friends. It's going to be fine. Yeah.
I would like to see an updated constitution that draws from the National Covenant of 2012 and that draws from the Freedom Charter of 2014. And so that new constitution must dictate a separation of powers. It must indicate freedom of speech, an independent media, independent judiciary, must reflect a core commitment to human rights, and that will include, I mean, total human rights. So I don't want to break off women's rights as a separate piece. I want all human rights to be codified in that constitution. And of course, independent media and freedom of expression are two major elements that we're hopefully beginning to see already. And I'm sure Mahmoud has a lot to add to this list. It would be great if we could get all of our lists together and possibly inform that new constitution. Thanks.
We'll do the best we can through the summary of this event, Rafif. Thank you very much for your comments. Mahmoud, please go ahead. If you can unmute yourself, or if you're still on the line here, just a second.
Yeah, I said
Yes.
I agree with all my colleagues, like very important point that they made. I think the key strategies, like to ensure that transition process also reflect to the will of the Syrians people, it's important. Number one, I think the inclusive political dialogue, and that's very important to bring all the Syrians from different background, different ethnicities, even marginalized like entities or people who weren't part of like the process. They should come all together and be a Syrian, unified Syrians all over again to start building their country. Number two, I believe constitutional reform, as they mentioned, my friends, and represent also a new democratic constitution that guarantee political, civil, and human rights, and all of those important to me. Free of speech, human rights, the right of women, all of those, it's very important. Also, I think fair election. We have to have fair election without any interference from any country, from any foreign country. We want to like build our country. We want to see the direction and take our country to the right direction that we see it before years. 4 years, we didn't have any free like election. 4 years, we didn't have any free of a speech. 4 years, we were like, you know, just outside of all the systems. So it's about time that as Syrians to come together. And number four, and very important, to reopen to our neighbors and have a normal relationship with our neighbors. I mean, we cannot afford, you know, to have any more wars or like, you know, bad relationship with our neighbors, with the Arabs, with the Turks, with the Israelis, with everybody. We want to have a good relationship with everybody. Enough is enough. I want to build my country. I want to have like my country peace and stable. I want to build our institution the way like any other country. And this is necessity for us in the present time. I think this is the main issue that I think like, you know, we should like take. And the transitional government, like they face a lot of challenges, and we will help them if they ask us.
Okay, great. So, you know, we're in an international audience right now. The international community has been watching developments in Syria for 13 years, especially over the last 2 weeks because of the fall of the regime. It's been interesting too, over the course of the war, and I've been dealing with Syria for about, from my earlier career, about a quarter century, so about 25 years. Though many of you have been dealing with it from birth, so you know much better than I do. But interestingly, the way that the war progressed, oftentimes you would hear in the media that the regime had, quote, won the war. I'm sure all of you had heard this a million times, right? And we had government officials who said that the regime had sort of, quote, won the war. During the Trump administration, we had a slightly different way of looking at that, which I thought was more reflective of the realities. And that is that a number of foreign armies and their personnel, not just military personnel, but also you know, governmental personnel, had come into different parts of Syria to support different parts of Syrian society. For example, in the case of the regime, we know Iran and Russia came in to support what was the Assad regime and to prop it up, and probably made an uprising and revolution that was probably going to take a year and turned it into 13 plus years, right? And of course, we've had, as Mahmoud mentioned, Turkey in the north coming in support of the Turkish-supported opposition in the country. We had of course, the United States, which is in eastern Syria in support of the Syrian Democratic Forces there, and those troops remain. And of course, then we had from the air, we had Israel bombing mostly Iranian targets, but not only during the course of the war, but also particularly over the last year or so following the October 7th, 2023 outbreak of the Hamas-Israel war. So my initial question to you, because we're trying to bring your voices to the international community. So because we have these foreign forces that are active inside of Syria, some of them which are leaving, which we hear the Russians might be leaving or pulling out their bases, some of which might be staying. In the case, Mahmoud, you mentioned Turkey. What should these forces now leave Syria? Is it important for them to stay during a certain period of time to help with stability? I mean, what role should these forces play in this interim period as we go forward in this transitional process? Ibrahim, if I could start with you, please.
Definitely. Thanks, Andrew. I'll start with the United States. I think the United States should not leave before there is a settlement between the Kurds and Damascus at this point. The United States and Turkey, they hold the largest leverage at this point for Turkey because of their connection to HTS, because they have directly proxies, the Syrian National Army in the north on the ground, and also because the Turkish army is actually inside Syria. All of that gives Turkey huge leverage. For the United States, it's also on the ground. And I'll add to that the United States, the issue of delisting HTS from the terrorism list and lifting the sanction is a huge leverage, because nobody can rule Syria as long as there are sanctions on Syria.
Ibrahim, can you hear us? I think we lost Ibrahim for a second again, unfortunately. We always lose him during his best lines. But don't worry, it'll come back. Okay. Let me move on to Farouq, please.
Yes, Andrew. So I couldn't hear the question. Can you repeat?
Sure. So in short, a number of foreign forces are inside of Syrian territory, some of which are leaving. We understand the Russians are evacuating their bases. The Iranians have been, let's say, cut off. There are still some Iranian-backed forces in the country. The United States is in northeast Syria. We have Turkey in the north. What should be the role of these foreign forces that have intervened in Syria over the past decade in this transitional period? What role should they play? What role shouldn't they play? How long should they stay? I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but if you could explain to me a little bit about how you and your community look at this.
Definitely, we as Syrian people, we don't want to see any foreign troops in our country on the long term. But at the current situation, some forces can help as a stabilization force, because we are still afraid that ISIS might use the current momentum and rise again. But these forces should work in collaboration with a legitimate government in Damascus to protect the sovereignty and the unity of the Syrian Republic. These forces should not be supporting specific militias. And therefore, we believe having an inclusive, legitimate, and recognized government in Damascus is very much needed to be able to also legitimize the presence of other foreign troops in Syria and make sure they support both the national interests and the regional stability.
Okay, great. Rafif.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't disagree with my colleagues, but I do. You mentioned Israel, and I would like to say that it's not simply activities of the past, but the recent advances into Syrian territory and the Netanyahu government's desire to double the number of settlers in the Golan Heights. So I think this has to be addressed immediately. But I want to pivot because you started from the premise of an international audience. And so I want to pivot away from military operations and speak to the issue of mostly European countries rushing to deport refugees. I think we cannot stress enough that those refugees who are able to go back safely are trying to do so. They have been free for literally 11 days. The vast majority of them do not have anywhere to go to, right? We know that much of Syria's infrastructure has been destroyed. So I would urge European partners to be a little bit patient and be a little bit more humane and in keeping with the values they espouse. The other almost request I would make or recommendation would be for the international community to bolster civil society. It has been encouraging civil society and supporting it these 13 years. And too often we've heard the comment of where's our return on investment, right? Fair point. Your return on investment started on December 9th. And so I believe with additional support as sanctions are either lifted or corrected so that they target the right people who are now living in Russia, right? I believe as restrictions are eased on Syrians, civil society and really the whole nation can begin to rebuild itself and become that modern, secular, equal rights-based, human rights-based vision that we've been dreaming of.
Okay, thank you. Mahmoud.
Yes, I think I agree most of like the comment that I heard, but right now Syria is not stable enough. To be honest, I've seen it, and I have been in Northeast, I've been like in Deir ez-Zor, I've been in Raqqa, and I'm glad that Iran is almost out of Syria. That was part of our big problem, but they still have a lot of militia on the borders, and they are not going to let go. I'm very sure about that. So in the long run, I don't want to see any foreign army, but in the present time, yes, I want the coalition to stay here to because we fought ISIS, there is still sleeping cells. The Syrian army is not capable to be spread all over like the territory of Syria. And the HTS, they don't have enough soldiers to be all over. So it has to be organized. That's what I said. We have to be unified. We have to put a plan for the future. And we're going to need the help of our coalition partner, the United States and the French and other countries. And even Turkey, if they want to be part of this, not manipulating the situation in northeast Syria, if they can help us to defeat ISIS, the sleeping cells. And also there is another issue nobody mentioned, it is the Captagon. Mm-hmm. Like it's not done yet. It's not over yet. Even the regime is gone, but the Iranians still there. Like on the border of Iraq, the militia. That also, it needs a task. It needs like a lot of resources, a lot of help from the international community to stop this drug corridor. I think the Syrian, they can come together. I think the United States is in the present time. I think they are a safety valve. That's how I view it. One thing that Rafif mentioned about Israel, and that is important. I think by taking like the buffer zone, like in the Golan Heights, in the present time, that a little bit give us like it has a different impact inside Syria. We try like to have like a normal relationship, to open a dialogue with all the countries, but this is not the right time for all of this. Instead of we open a dialogue and have a good relationship and talk with our neighbors, you know, this is more important. But hopefully it is temporarily. It's not for long, and they will leave that buffer zone.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to, Ibrahim has been kind enough because he was cut off by the transmission he put through on the chat to me his points. And I'd like to read them now just to include them in our discussion. First, we partially heard the U.S. could play a constructive role to mediate between the Kurds and Turkey. And this gets a little bit to Mahmoud's comments as well. Second, Turkey could also pressure Damascus to be inclusive and open for a political process and a national dialogue. And then third, all foreign forces should leave Syria when there is legitimate and inclusive government in Damascus that can offer security and maintain Syria's territorial integrity. So I think those are all great points. I think they dovetail with many of those that have already been mentioned. Now, in terms of because part of those that are joining us today work in and around the United States government, and also, of course, allied governments, which are now looking to try and help this process inside of Syria. There's been quite a bit of talk about the issue of delisting HTS as a foreign terrorist organization, also a whole host of other issues, including the Caesar sanctions, which are due to be renewed by tomorrow, and the text of which I believe is in current legislation, and I believe due to be passed tomorrow. And I just wondered about your views of and a number of you have already mentioned it, about the designation of HTS and, of course, Caesar sanctions. Some of you used the word leverage. Some of you use the word accountable. What should be the role? How would you like the United States to I wouldn't say to leverage, because I don't want to be unfair, but how would you like the United States to look at these designations? They're there for purposes of the United States in the case of Washington, but they're also there in terms of what we want to see in terms of Syria and what we don't want to see in terms of Syria. So if I could ask some of the panelists here, and Ibrahim, if you're able to transmit, maybe with your camera off, hanging out the window, whatever best way you can, what should the United States and its allies do in terms of this? What's the best way? What's the best way to use these instruments on entities that have evolved throughout the Syrian conflict?
I'll try to have some brief comments. I hope they go through. The issue of sanctions is extremely important for Syria. There is no way to revive the economy without lifting the sanctions. However, it's also a very important leverage to actually pressure any government in Damascus to be inclusive and to actually be open for power sharing in the future. So I believe that if I am to offer a recommendation, it's to actually to have a roadmap to lift the sanctions in return for very clear demands from Damascus now. Some of them, of course, are related to the security of the United States and why HTS was listed, and why, because, to lift the sanctions, we also need to delist HTS. They're kind of connected at this point, since HTS is the government in Damascus. So that's some of those points are related to the American security, but also when it comes to the Syrian side, for HTS to open the door and accept that they cannot be the only power in Damascus, they cannot dominate the Syrian government, is something very important in return to probably some at least partial relief or suspension of some sanctions to allow Syrian economy to start breathing.
Okay, Great, very articulate, and it all worked. So I don't know what exactly you were doing, or if you're on the roof of your building now. But whatever it is, sorry. All jokes aside, we're in a revolutionary.
Almost, Andrew, you got it. Almost.
We're in a revolutionary environment, so we have to use our best attempts to transmit. So, Farouq, do you have any comments in this regard?
Yeah, well, definitely the role of the United States government is very important, more than ever now. And we need it at multiple levels. We needed to not let regional players pursue their individual agendas in Syria again and support different militias, different political bodies, and provoke a new cycle of violence. It's very important to have the American leadership to organize and lead the international response and international dealing with Syria. We suffered a lot a few years ago in Syria because of the lack of the US leadership in the region. Second, we also need the US to convince Israel to stop its bombardment of Syria. This is from one side, it comes at a momentum of unity and celebration for the Syrian people who are keen not to hear the sounds of the airstrikes again, who are keen to have peace and calm nights again. And it's really worrying and outrageous for all of us here in Damascus to keep hearing these airstrikes. And some of them are destroying evidence, which are very important for accountability in Syria and for the security of the region and the world. So, for example, we are going to facilities which we suspect they were used in producing chemical weapons. And we need to collect the evidence, but the Israelis keep bombing them. And these evidence are important for the whole world to know who are the companies which were supplying the chemical materials, who are the scientists, and where are they now? Are they in Lebanon? Are they in Europe? So we need this evidence and these informations, but the Israelis are just bombing everything. So this needs to stop. Also, we need the support from the United States, as I said earlier, to the civil society, and to encourage the current authorities to follow a political process that includes all stakeholders and help to rebuild a new free and pluralistic Syria.
Okay, great. Rafif.
Yes, thank you. You know, you have these great experts, and I would like to disagree with them, but I can't, right? So I want to piggyback on something that Ibrahim said, which is the linkage between the designation and the sanctions. And the reality is that puts Syrians really between a rock and a hard place. They want to rebuild their country. They want to rebuild their economy. They want to rebuild everything and have a new country, but they can't, right? And so we need to stop it almost like having a chicken and egg argument. I think reducing the sanctions and removing the designation allows Syria to progress. I believe HTS has made incredible progress since December 8th. And I think they could only be encouraged to make more during the remainder of their tenure. I think the US can also look at civil society organizations and I've said this before, bolster civil society, but in particular, I think Syria needs an independent watchdog agency. I think we need an organization that is protected at all costs, that can pursue accountability and justice, that can ensure that not just HTS, but any successive government is respecting our new reality, is ensuring inclusivity, is calling out any violations, constitutional or at the personal liberties level or human freedoms. So I think these are the kinds of things that the United States can help shape But ultimately, I believe this needs to be Syrian-led. And so it's not just the United States, but really the whole international community to come in and assist where it makes sense, but please don't stay, right? Syrians would like to continue this process and own this process.
Sure, and
Thanks.
I can speak on behalf of the American people. We don't want to stay any longer than we have to.
Right.
It's. I think we can all agree on that. We want, of course, Syria to be independent and with all the controls and all the sovereignty that it needs to carry out its affairs. I think the recent election also in the United States demonstrates that. And I think your and Ibrahim's earlier comments concerning that in terms of what presence of troops and so on is important. Mahmoud, do you have anything to add in this regard?
Yes, I think we want to build Syria, and we have to stand with our new transitional government in Damascus. By keeping these actions, I don't think any progress will be made, because we already know that Syria is almost a failing state, like economically, like our infrastructure is destroyed. Our institution is not good anymore. It's not functioning. And we need help from the international community to help us like rebuilding our institution, to help us rebuilding our infrastructure, finding new job opportunities for like millions of Syrians, bringing all those refugees from all over the world, because they want to come back home. This is fact. They want to come back home, but we are not ready to receive them if we are not able to provide services, to provide like a lot of resources to them. Our resources in here is been bombarded by Turkey too previously, and we need help. So the United States and the international community, they have to stand with us, not to get involved in our internal affair, but to help us rebuild our country, and also providing some program like justice and accountability, like help us like with the system that they have. Syrian people is very, very intelligent, and they know, I am very sure they know how to guide themselves to the future.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So we have only a few minutes left, and I have a couple of questions that are in the box here, and I'd like to ask them to some of you. And of course, you all don't have to answer. Some of you probably do want to answer, and I'll try to go as quickly as I possibly can, just for a limited amount of time. I'd also like to say that I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I think we should do this on a regular basis. Just do it as a check-in along the way. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, especially because I know that you're all really busy and we all are trying to figure out what's next in Syria. So the first question is, isn't HTS's governance in Idlib so far encouraging? For example, yesterday, the BBC's international editor specifically asked Jolani whether HTS would allow, indeed encourage, women's education. And his response was, he talked about university education for women in Idlib, and surely between now and March, it's essential that the international community help the interim government spread the Idlib template throughout Syria. So in a sense, the report was saying that what's been happening in Idlib has been encouraging, and if it spreads throughout Syria, it's going to be even more encouraging. How do you see it? Is HTS's behavior until now indeed encouraging, both in Idlib and also since it arrived in Damascus? Rafif, I see you have your hand up, so not that I'm surprised by that. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I kind of want to break this down a little bit on the question of women being allowed to pursue an education. I mean, am I supposed to be grateful that I'm allowed to pursue an education? Give me a break. So yes, women will pursue university educations, and women will run ministries, and women will participate in every aspect of rebuilding the nation and beyond. In terms of HTS's administration of Idlib, it really depends on who you ask. As far as I'm aware, there are still thousands of prisoners held in HTS prisons in Idlib, and they have not been released. So I'm on behalf of those who are asking the same question, when will they be released? I believe the administration of a small province is nothing like the administration of an entire country. So this requires participation from all Syrians, especially the 50% who are ready to jump in.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
That's a great answer. Why don't we move on to the second question, if you don't mind? And this, I know that I bet I know who's going to answer this. Maybe I'm wrong. Are there tribal challenges threatening the unity and democracy in Syria? Are there challenges from Turkey concerning the Kurds? Mahmoud, I'm guessing you're going to want to throw your hat in the ring on this one, right? I mean, can you give us a little bit of a rundown about the Kurdish tribal? There's been a lot. It's a lot to unpack in a short amount of time, but I think you're the guy to do this at this moment.
It's a lot of it's a big task. I mean, ahead of us, and it's a challenge. We're trying to maintain peace and stability, and Turkey is sparking a lot of militia in Deir ez-Zor and in around like Kobani and around also Manbij. And we trying like to maintain like peace and stability in the region, not letting ISIS to have a chance or like to enter through this. And we explained that to Turkey. And we want to make sure Turkey with us on this. But they always claim for their national security, the PKK and all of this that we heard a million. We don't have a PKK. It's an ideology that people, they have the right to follow whoever like education or ideology that they desire. This is their choice, but we don't have any foreign fighters from PKK. Unfortunately, it might lead us to a civil war between like Syrian in Deir ez-Zor area, which is, I am very worried. I'm trying because I come from tribal like family, and my family is a leader of Al-Jubur tribe and also part of Al-Aqidat we have. So we're trying to maintain peace and stability. We're trying to explain the Kurds are part of us. This is not something they even like gave a lot of like fallen loved ones to defeat Daesh, and we fought Daesh together. We want to be Syrians. We don't want to be Kurdish and Arab and Yazidis anymore. But this is a problem we're going to face and challenge in the future. And I hope Turkey will realize that we are not trying, even in this region, divide Syria. We believe in unifying Syria. But let's like get together and open a dialogue with Turkey and all of them to settle this down. I think that will be helpful.
Okay. Farouq, I think I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is, as I said earlier, it's a moment of unity for the Syrian people. And the Syrian people are looking at their brothers and sisters in northeastern Syria and waiting for them to join the nation. Affiliations to external terrorist groups will not help any divisive separatist militia in northeastern Syria. We see our colleagues and brothers and sisters demonstrating in Al-Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, wanted to join a unified Syria, and we saw militia militants affiliated with SDF shooting at people in the streets. And this will have an end. Sooner or later, Syria will return united as one nation. Kurds, Arabs, and all ethnicities live together with equal citizenship rights. But affiliations with international terrorist militias like the PKK definitely will not serve stability in Syria.
Okay, that's great. We're at the very end of the program, unfortunately. I wish we could go for another hour, although I'm sure you all have a lot of things to do. There's a lot of work to be done in the new Syria. I'd like just to repeat my earlier message to all of you, heartfelt, that we are so happy that you are rid of this horrible dictator, and we stand ready to be with you in managing these crises as they go ahead. And I think actually the kind of dialogue that we had here today is a good way to kick off that process. And we should do that more often, privately and publicly. But I really just want to congratulate all of you on your victory. And I look forward to seeing you during our next policy forum. If you would like to be in touch, of course, you know how to find me privately. But we at the Institute are very keen to follow new events in Syria, and please let us know about your developments. And of course, if you're coming to visit in Washington, D.C. So in speaking to the general audience, thank you for joining us today. This is signing off from DC. We hope you have a happy holiday and stay tuned for the next and upcoming policy forums from the Washington Institute as this issue unfolds. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.